They smiled as if I were already gone. That was my first thought the day I arrived at St. Haven Nursing Home, a place that promised care, rest, and dignity for those of us crossing the quiet side of 50. My name is Helen Graves, 59 years old, retired teacher, and until that morning I believed kindness could still be trusted. My daughter Lily held my hand as we stepped through the automatic doors. She whispered, "You'll love it here, Mom. They're like family." The lobby smelled faintly of disinfectant and roses. A nurse in a spotless white uniform offered tea with a smile so wide it almost seemed rehearsed. I remember the way her perfume clung to the air, sweet, clinical, relentless. The light above the reception desk flickered once and steadied, as if warning me that comfort here might come with conditions. For the first few days, I tried to belong. The warmth of routine soothed the edges of my nerves. Breakfast at 8, physiotherapy at 10, group crossword by noon. I sipped tea from a chipped porcelain cup, tracing the crack that ran across its handle. My roommate, an old pianist named Martha, hummed lullabies when the rain tapped the windows. There were flowers on the counter, and the radio played soft jazz during lunch. It all seemed too gentle to doubt. Still, I felt watched. Not in the ordinary sense, the way staff glance to check your pulse or gait, but deeper, quieter. Their smiles lingered a second too long. Conversations hushed when I entered. The night nurse, Janet, once touched my shoulder and said, "You can sleep easy here." Her hand was warm. Her eyes were not. Each night, the hallway carried sounds that didn't belong. A faint clicking, as if a typewriter hid behind the walls. I told myself it was the heating system settling. Yet every time I opened my eyes, the faint hum of electricity buzzed behind my headboard, close enough to hear, too soft to locate. One evening, during what they called quiet hour, I walked to the day room. The reflection in the glass door stopped me cold. Behind me stood a nurse, her smile framed by the shimmer of the hallway light. I turned. No one there. Only the hum of the vending machine and the smell of bleach. When I faced the glass again, the reflection remained. Her eyes moved, though she wasn't behind me. I laughed under my breath, pretending not to tremble. "Get a grip, Helen," I whispered. "You're tired, that's all." But the reflection leaned closer, head tilted, as if measuring my fear. The scent of roses turned metallic in my throat. That night, I couldn't sleep. I counted each tick of the corridor clock until dawn painted the ceiling pale gray. At breakfast, the same nurse served porridge with that bright, flawless grin. "How did you sleep, dear?" she asked. I said, "Peacefully," and she patted my hand, lingering just a beat too long. Later, when Lily called, I didn't mention any of it. I told her the staff were kind, that the meals were decent, that I was adjusting. She sounded relieved, and guilt pressed against my ribs. I wanted her to believe I was safe. After lunch, I wandered near the nurses' station. Papers shuffled, laughter bubbled from somewhere unseen. I caught sight of a mirror hanging beside a chart of emergency procedures. The glass reflected part of my room, my own bed, the window, and something else. A small dark circle above the curtain rail. I stepped closer, my breath hitching. It wasn't a blemish or a nail. It was a lens, tiny, precise, gleaming like an unblinking eye. My throat tightened. "Excuse me," I said softly to the nurse sorting pills. "What's that above my curtain?" She didn't look up. "Ventilation sensor," she replied too quickly. I nodded, pretending to accept it. But later, alone, I climbed on the chair by the window. The so-called sensor was warm to the touch, humming faintly like a sleeping creature. My pulse hammered in my ears. I sat down, hands shaking, and whispered into the quiet, "Someone's watching." Outside, the evening light faded. The hallway filled with the sound of shoes and distant laughter. Through the open door, I caught a glimpse of the nurse again. Her smile still bright, still practiced, still wrong. She turned her head slightly, as if checking whether I'd noticed. I did. And as the door clicked shut, her smile stayed long after she left. Footsteps told me more than their words did. They carried secrets down the polished corridor, a rhythm that never matched the hour on the clock. The nurses spoke in soft tones when near me, but their whispers sharpened just beyond my door. Each word cut short, like a candle snuffed mid-flame. I learned to listen instead of ask. In a place built on care, silence had more shape than speech. At night, I counted those footsteps. 2 slow, 1 fast. A pause. Then the creak of a trolley wheel stopping just outside. The air held that dry, metallic scent of sterilized bedding mixed with something else. Fear, maybe, or the faint dust of pills crushed long ago. I lay still, pretending to sleep, pretending I didn't hear my name spoken in low tones through the keyhole. Is she awake? No, she's calm tonight. She's not the calm kind. Their shoes moved again, fading into the hum of the lights. I stared at the clock on the wall, its tick uneven, slower than it should be. Each sound came a fraction late, as though time itself hesitated to move forward. I told myself I was imagining it, that this was what aging did to the mind. It blurred rhythm, bent sound. But the pillow under my head hid a truth no one warned me about. It happened the next morning. I found a folded paper beneath that same pillow. The handwriting was hurried, slanted, almost afraid of being seen. 3 words. They see everything. I felt my stomach tighten, my pulse quicken. The note smelled faintly of antiseptic and old paper, as though it had been stored somewhere cold. I looked toward the hallway where a young orderly swept the floor, eyes darting between me and the door. When our gazes met, he shook his head ever so slightly and whispered, "Don't show anyone." Then he pushed his cart away, the sound of its wheels echoing like guilt. That afternoon, I mentioned it to one of the nurses, testing her face for any reaction. "Strange noises in the hall last night," I said. She smiled, polite, rehearsed. "Old buildings creak. You'll get used to it." "But the note. There are no notes, dear. Maybe you dreamed it." "I don't dream on paper," I murmured. Her eyes hardened, then softened again too quickly. "You should rest more." Later, the young orderly found me in the common room. He spoke barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't trust the night staff," he said. "They keep things hidden." "What things?" I asked. "The vents, the wiring." He glanced around. "Meet me after dinner. I'll show you." That evening, when the last tray clattered away, I followed him down the dim hallway to my room. The only sound was the electric buzz of the ceiling lights. He reached above the bed, pressing against the vent cover until it shifted with a click. Inside, a narrow gleam caught the light. A wire, thin, copper, and vanishing deeper into the wall. "What is it?" "Not for air," he said. "For eyes." My throat dried. "You mean cameras?" He hesitated. "Not exactly. Something that listens." We stood there listening. The hum of the lights, the faint whir of the clock, the sound of our own breath trembling in the stale air. He reached into his pocket and handed me a small torn page from a maintenance log, handwritten, not typed. I read the entry. "Inspection complete, recording units active." Beneath it, an alphanumeric code ending in B21. My fingers trembled. Why would this be in my room? He whispered, "They test new things here." That night, I didn't sleep. Every sound became a question. The clock ticked unevenly. The pillow rustled when no one moved. The hallway lights dimmed, then flared again. I began writing down the times of each flicker in my notebook, 7:04, 9:12, 11:59, hoping to find a pattern that could prove I wasn't losing my mind. When I told the head nurse the next morning, she only smiled. "We'll adjust your medication," she said. "It'll help with the perceptions." "I don't need help seeing what's real," I replied. She tilted her head. "Sometimes we all do." Her tone was gentle, but I felt the warning under it. "Stay quiet. Don't pry." The clock behind her ticked louder than before, like a heartbeat outside of my own. That evening, when the orderly passed my door, he didn't look in. The cart moved slower than usual, and the sound of its wheels dragged longer into the silence. I pressed my ear to the wall. Nothing. Then, one soft click, as if a switch had been turned off. The air stilled completely. The ticking stopped when I breathed. My name was written in someone else's hand. I saw it clearly under the fluorescent light, the letters neat, familiar, but wrong. The paper carried my history, or rather, a version of it that didn't belong to me. They called it an admission update. I called it theft of truth. The librarian had brought it quietly during her volunteer shift, an older woman with soft eyes and trembling fingers. "I thought you should see this," she whispered, sliding the folder beneath a stack of magazines. I waited until the hallway emptied before opening it. The folder smelled faintly of damp paper and alcohol wipes. The edges were frayed, the pages uneven, as if someone had torn out sections and replaced them. My name, typed in sharp black ink, sat under a heading that didn't make sense. Behavioral Observation, Patient 14B. The notes described delusional tendencies, false accusations, and emotional instability. Under Family Contact, it said, "Daughter unreachable." I read that line twice. Then again, unreachable. Lily had called 2 days ago. We spoke about the lilac bush outside her window, about how she'd visit this weekend. My hand trembled so hard I almost tore the page. I turned another sheet. There was a diagnosis form signed with a name I didn't recognize. Dr. Wilkins. I had never met a Dr. Wilkins. The texture of the paper was uneven, patches of moisture around the staples. The ink on my supposed signature bled slightly, like someone had pressed too hard copying from a template. The librarian leaned in. "Sometimes," she murmured, "records evolve, especially when someone upstairs wants them to." I froze. "Evolve?" She nodded. "You didn't hear it from me." Then she left, her shoes whispering down the linoleum hall, leaving me with a file that smelled like disinfectant and deceit. That night, I took the folder to my room and compared it to my original admission copy, the one Lily and I had signed together. My old file listed chronic fatigue and mild arthritis. This new one replaced that with early-stage cognitive impairment. They'd rewritten me into frailty, made my words less credible before I could even speak them. The stakes became painfully clear. If they could rewrite my history, they could erase my sanity next. At dinner, I confronted one of the nurses. "Who authorized the file change?" I asked. She blinked. "What file?" "My admission record." "Ma'am, those aren't accessible to patients." "I have a right to my name." Her lips curved faintly. "You have the right to rest. That's all." Her tone was soft, but the message wasn't. When I returned to my room, the folder was gone. The drawer where I had hidden it sat, slightly ajar. On the table lay a paperclip bent into a perfect oval, a silent taunt, or a message. I didn't know which. The next morning, the head administrator called me into his office. "You've been disturbing staff," he said. "I'm asking questions." "About private documents," he corrected. "We can't have that kind of curiosity here." I wanted to shout, to demand truth, but his calmness was like wet cement. It hardened around every word I tried to free. He pushed a pen toward me. "Sign this acknowledgement form. It's for your own peace of mind." I looked at the pen. Its barrel was slick with fingerprints, the ink slightly smeared near the tip. "Peace of mind?" I repeated. "Whose mind are you keeping at peace, mine or yours?" He smiled. We both know perception can be fragile. Something inside me cracked quietly, the way a page folds before it tears. I didn't sign. Instead, I stood, placed my hands on the folder he thought I hadn't seen, and said, "You can't keep changing what's real." He didn't respond, only straightened his tie and looked past me at the wall clock ticking too slowly. That night, I found another note slipped under my door. No words, just a copied line from a document typed in uneven font. Transfer considered for patient 14B. I realized then that the new file wasn't just a lie, it was preparation. I tore the paper into strips, each one trembling between my fingers. My reflection in the window looked foreign, rewritten, like the record itself. The wind outside pressed against the glass, and in the silence of the corridor, I heard the faint hum of a printer starting somewhere down the hall. Another file being rewritten. Another truth quietly buried. Someone rewrote me into silence. Kindness has a price. Mine was $4,200 a month. That's what the invoice said, printed in clean blue ink, folded neatly inside an envelope with my name on it. When Lily's payment alerts began failing, I thought it was a bank error. But kindness, I've learned, often hides behind good stationery. I brought the bill to the front desk, asking the woman there to explain the charges. She smiled, that same rehearsed warmth the nurses wore, and said, "It's just the new recreation package." "I don't recall signing up for anything," I replied. "Oh, don't worry," she said. "It's already handled. Everything here is handled." The light above her desk flickered once, throwing shadows across the glossy counter. I watched her pen move across another document, quick and confident. My name again, though I hadn't spoken. Later that afternoon, I visited the administrative wing. It always smelled faintly of printer toner and lemon polish, clean enough to make lies look legitimate. The billing officer sat behind a desk stacked with manila folders, his glasses slipping down the bridge of his nose. "I need to see my ledger," I told him. "All charges since I arrived." He blinked. "That's not standard procedure." "I'm not asking for procedure," I said. "I'm asking for proof." He hesitated, then opened a drawer and pulled out a thick binder labeled with my room number. The pages shimmered faintly under the desk lamp. Rows of numbers, categories, signatures. Recreation fees, $12,200. Therapeutic massage, $900. Comfort surcharge, $2,100. "I never had a massage," I said quietly. He looked at me through his glasses. "Maybe it's coded differently." "And this comfort surcharge?" His lips parted, but no sound came. I leaned closer, reading the bottom of the page where my name appeared again, signed in looping cursive. "This isn't my handwriting." He exhaled slowly. "Sometimes staff help with signatures to keep the paperwork moving." "That's forgery," I said. He glanced at the door. "Please," he whispered, "don't ask again." The fluorescent light above us buzzed, flickering in a slow rhythm. I could see sweat forming at his temple. "Why?" I asked. "Where does the money go?" He lowered his voice. "Half of it's redirected to something called the Comfort Initiative. That's all I know." "And the rest?" He shook his head. "You don't want to dig there." I folded the paper carefully, the sound of it sharper than it should have been. The stakes were no longer about stolen kindness. They were about survival. If they could fake my consent on financial records, they could do worse in medical ones. Before leaving, I noticed a small brass key on the edge of his desk. "What's that for?" I asked. He slipped it into his drawer. "Old archive cabinet. Nothing useful." But his tone betrayed him. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that cabinet. I imagined it filled with paper ghosts, signatures that never existed, dates rewritten to suit the story they needed. My hands itched to find it. The next morning, I went early to the hallway near the archives. The door was unmarked, the kind you'd overlook unless you were looking too hard. I tried the knob, locked, of course. A cleaning cart rolled by. The janitor, a quiet woman with eyes too kind to fake, paused. "You lost, dear?" "No," I said. "Just looking for the truth." She smiled faintly. "That room keeps plenty of it locked away." Her words stayed with me. After lunch, I returned to my own room and found an envelope slipped under the door. Inside was a photocopy of a bank statement with 2 entries circled in red ink, each labeled Comfort Initiative, both drawn from the same patient account number, mine. I held the page to the window. The afternoon light passed through it, illuminating the watermark like a revelation. My pulse quickened. The ledger wasn't just accounting, it was confession written in currency. When I brought it to the billing officer again, he didn't deny it. He only whispered, "You shouldn't have that. Why not? Because proof glows brighter than lies, he said, his voice trembling. He reached for the paper, but I stepped back. Not this time, I told him. As I left, I glanced once more at the lamp above his desk. The bulb flickered again, flooding the page with a faint golden hue. It almost looked holy. I thought of every kindness I'd paid for, every smile, every promise, and realized none of it had been free. The ledger glowed like confession. He said, "We only follow orders." The words hung in the hallway like a draft that wouldn't die. I had asked him why the forms in my file didn't match what I'd signed, why the numbers kept shifting, why I was being billed for care I never received. His answer wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was obedient. The air in the corridor was colder than usual. My hands trembled as I held the clipboard, its metal edge biting into my palm. The pages on it fluttered faintly from the vent's chill, like something alive and frightened. I walked straight to the senior nurse's office. Her door was half closed, the curtains swaying slightly as if caught between two different kinds of silence. She looked up when I entered, her eyes darting toward the hallway. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "I need to understand," I told her. "These signatures aren't mine." Her voice dropped lower. "You don't want to ask that." "I already did." She sighed, setting down her pen. "Orders come from the top. We document what we're told to document." I stepped closer. "That's not care. That's compliance." Her jaw tightened. "It's survival." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the hum of the radiator. I could see her hands shaking. A photograph of her two children sat on the corner of her desk, their smiles frozen under cheap glass. That picture seemed to anchor her guilt. "Who gives the orders?" I asked. "The director," she whispered. "He calls them quiet cases. If a patient causes trouble, complaints, letters, inquiries, we adjust the files. It keeps audits smooth." "And the truth?" Her eyes glistened. "Truth doesn't fit the paperwork." The temperature in the room felt sharper then, the kind that stings the back of your throat. I watched her wipe her palms against her uniform, leaving faint, damp marks. She reached into her drawer and pulled out a memo, sliding it across the desk. "Reference HR 4829, she said. "It's a directive from administration. We're told to reduce friction." I unfolded the page. The words were vague but deliberate, phrases like behavioral management, cooperative notation, outcome efficiency. Every sentence hid behind euphemisms, dressed in formality to disguise harm. "This isn't medicine," I said. "No," she murmured. "It's a machine." For the first time I saw fear not as weakness but as evidence. It was the shard she couldn't hide, the proof that morality still flickered somewhere beneath her compliance. She looked at me then, voice cracking. "I'll file a report, quietly. Maybe it'll reach someone who still listens." I wanted to believe her. The frost on the window caught the afternoon light, drawing thin veins across the glass like scars. The air smelled faintly metallic, as if winter had slipped in through the vents. Before leaving, I said, "If they punish you, I'll speak for you." She shook her head. "They don't punish. They erase." Her words followed me down the hall. I could feel the cold deepening with every step, as if the building itself disapproved of her courage. I passed the nurse's station. Laughter bubbled faintly from the break room, a sound too normal for what I'd just learned. That night, I lay awake, the clipboard still beside me. I imagined her typing that report, fingers trembling, eyes flicking to the door. I imagined her sealing it in an envelope marked "Confidential," trusting the system she secretly feared. Morning arrived gray and soundless. The hallway outside my room was unusually quiet. When I stepped out, I noticed the break room bulletin board, new notices pinned neatly, one on top of the other. Among them, a short printed line caught my eye. "Effective immediately, Nurse S. Turner reassigned." Her office door was open. The curtains no longer moved. Inside, the desk was bare, the photograph gone. Only a faint ring of dust outlined where it had stood. A janitor passing by stopped and whispered, "They cleared her out before sunrise." I nodded, throat tight, unable to speak. The air felt even colder than before, a chill that didn't come from weather, but from warning. Her locker was emptied before breakfast. I wrote every day, but the mail was a lie. Each morning I sat at the small wooden desk by my window, the paper trembling beneath my hand, ink pooling where my thoughts hesitated. The candle on the sill burned low, its wax collecting like melted promises. I told myself the letters mattered, that if Lily read them, she'd know the truth, that I was still fighting, that I hadn't disappeared inside their silence. But weeks passed, and no reply came. The postcard arrived every Thursday at 10, the wheels scraping against the curb, a sound that used to mean connection. Now it meant absence. I asked the front desk nurse if my mail had gone out. She smiled the same way they all did, gentle, hollow. "Of course, dear, everything's sent on schedule." Still, I waited by the window each afternoon, watching the mail van turn away without stopping. The air outside smelled faintly of rain and disinfectant, a mix that never left this place. Then, one evening, a janitor paused by my door, a kind man, gray-haired, with a quiet sort of courage. "You write a lot," he said softly. "It's the only thing they can't stop me from doing," I replied. He hesitated, glancing down the hall. "Maybe not stop, but delay." He slipped something from his pocket, a torn envelope, edges frayed, stamp half peeled. "Found this in the trash room," he said. "Didn't look like garbage to me." The envelope was mine, my handwriting, my return address, the faint taste of glue where the seal had been broken. The inside was empty. My words, gone. My message, stolen. "Who would throw this away?" I whispered. He lowered his voice. "Mail never leaves through the front. They reroute everything through the admin wing first. Security check, they call it." "Security for who?" He looked down. "Not for you." That night, I stayed awake by candlelight, rereading the copies I'd kept in my notebook. Each line felt like a confession no one had heard. I imagined my daughter sitting at her kitchen table, wondering why I'd stopped writing. Maybe she thought I'd given up. Maybe that's what they wanted her to think. I tested the system. The next day, I sealed a letter without a stamp, no address, no name, only a folded drawing inside, a bird breaking from its cage. I handed it to the nurse, smiling politely. "Could you send this today?" "Certainly," she said, her voice as smooth as glass. That night, I waited near the staff corridor, hidden by the curtain that never quite met the wall. At exactly 9, she entered the mailroom. The sound of the metal bin opening, a short rustle, then a soft tearing noise. I saw her lift my envelope, glance inside, and toss it into the wastebasket. I stepped out. "Working late?" She froze. "You startled me." "You read them first?" "Facility policy," she said quickly. "We ensure all communications are appropriate." I laughed once, dry, bitter. "Appropriate grief? Appropriate fear?" She said nothing. Her eyes flicked to the door, calculating distance. I whispered, "Tell them I know." The next morning, my letters were gone from the drawer, every last one. The candle wick was cut short, as though even light had been censored. I went to the post clerk that afternoon, an older woman with spectacles that made her look too honest to lie. "Did any mail go out from my room this month?" I asked. She checked the logbook. "Not from your floor," she said. "None at all?" She shook her head. "Not since March." My throat closed. It was May. 2 months erased. 2 months of my voice stolen mid-sentence. That night, I devised my own route. I folded a message into the crossword book the janitor had given me and handed it to him when he collected trash. "Accidentally left it by the bin," I said. He nodded once. "I'll make sure it finds daylight." From then on, my letters hid in puzzles, beneath the cover of ordinary ink. I stopped signing them, hoping anonymity might let them pass. Some nights I thought I heard the hum of machines sorting through paper, as if the building itself were reading every word I wrote. Weeks later, I received something on my tray during breakfast, a letter addressed in Lily's handwriting. My heart raced as I tore it open, but inside, the words weren't hers. They were typed, cold, detached. "We appreciate your cooperation. Communication channels are monitored for safety." I stared at it until the candle's flame bent toward me, trembling. Someone else had answered my letter. They called it a safety board. I called it judgment. The meeting was held in a narrow conference room at the far end of the east corridor, where the walls carried every sound too clearly. Chairs scraped, papers rustled. The hum of the ceiling light trembled just above my head. It smelled faintly of coffee and antiseptic, as if even the air had been sanitized to remove emotion. I sat at the far end of the table, a clipboard in front of me, though I wasn't allowed to take notes. Across from me sat 5 faces: administrators, clinicians, one silent observer. At the head, the director, his hands folded neatly, his smile measured. "We're here to ensure everyone's safety," he said, "including yours." I wanted to believe that, once, but I'd already seen how safety became a weapon when truth was inconvenient. The arbiter, a young social worker named Claire, was my only ally in the room. She looked nervous, her pen tapping against the meeting transcript already half filled with jargon. Incident report, behavioral deviation, patient response protocol. I could see her trying to find courage in those words, though each one was designed to strip me of meaning. The director began reading from a file. There have been multiple reports of unsettling behavior, repeated confrontations with staff, claims of surveillance, paranoid tendencies. I interrupted quietly. "You mean I noticed the hidden lens?" He didn't look up. "This isn't about equipment. It's about stability." Claire spoke then, voice soft but steady. "If there are claims of monitoring without consent, that constitutes a privacy violation. We need to verify evidence before labeling this instability." The room shifted. The nurse beside the director cleared her throat. "There's no proof of such equipment," she said. "There was a lens in the door," I insisted. "I saw it." "Patients often misinterpret reflections," the nurse replied, her tone polished with experience. The director smiled again, his voice syrup-thick. "We don't question perception. We simply assess its reliability." My pulse hammered. "So I'm unreliable because I noticed too much?" He didn't answer. Instead, he tapped a small silver bell on the table. The sound rang through the room, clear, controlled, final. Claire's hand paused mid-note. "Sir," she said, "before you conclude, I'd like to request documentation. The patient deserves a copy of the meeting record." He turned toward her slowly. "This record is internal. Dissemination requires board approval." "Then I'll file for review," she said. His smile thinned. "That won't be necessary." Silence grew like a fog. I could feel the air temperature drop, the hum of the ceiling light faltering. My throat tightened, but I forced my words through. "You can bury my complaints in minutes and memos, but the truth doesn't vanish when you close the file." For a brief moment, Claire looked up from her notes, just long enough for our eyes to meet. I saw the flicker of something there. Apology, maybe fear. She nodded slightly, then whispered, "I'll try." The director turned toward her. "Ms. Hale, do you wish to remain impartial or involved?" Her hand trembled. "Involved," she said. He stared for a long second before replying, "Then be prepared for responsibility." When the bell rang again, discussion was declared closed. Verdict: administrative observation for 90 days. No mention of evidence, no acknowledgement of the falsified forms or missing letters, just control disguised as care. As we stood, the sound of chairs scraping echoed like judgment itself. I reached for the clipboard, but the nurse quickly slid it away. "Records remain with the board," she said. Claire lingered by the door, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're not wrong," she said. "You're just too loud for them." I almost laughed. "Then I'll make them hear me." Her eyes darted toward the director. "Careful, the walls here echo." That night, I replayed every sound in that room. The scratch of pens, the bell's metallic strike, the closing shuffle of feet. I wondered how many before me had sat in that same chair, told that silence meant safety, that compliance was care. The next morning, a new notice appeared on the board outside my room. Resident observation authorized. Below it, a timestamp. Someone had already written me into compliance before the meeting even began. Still, I kept hearing that bell in my head, not as submission, but as a vow. A reminder that the sound of truth, once heard, can't be unmade. The bell still rings in my dreams. Reflections don't lie. People do. That thought hit me hardest when I saw my own face flicker on a screen I was never meant to see. The glow from the monitor cut through the dimness of the storage room, turning every dust mote into evidence. My reflection was there too, sitting, reading, sleeping, all caught through the mirror that had once seemed harmless. The orderly stood beside me, his hands trembling. "I couldn't keep this anymore," he whispered. He slipped me the flash drive earlier that day, hidden beneath a folded napkin on my tray. It had been labeled simply, "Staff Training." Now I knew what kind of training they meant. The file opened with a soft click, and my world fractured in half. Timestamps scrolled across the corner, March 14th, 9:32 p.m., then April 3rd, 6:08 a.m. Same room, same me, but not the same trust. They had filmed everything, my conversations, my sleep, my silence. Nurses I'd once believed were kind leaned into the camera, laughing. "She talks to herself again," one said. Another adjusted the angle, her hand brushing the frame of the mirror that I had stared into each morning. My voice, from the recording, sounded older, fragile. "Lily, I know you'll visit soon," I'd murmured in the dark. The laughter that followed wasn't mine. The orderly swallowed hard. "There's more," he said. "Look at entry number 7. I clicked through the folder, fingers stiff, the screen light burning against my skin. Entry 7 showed the director, standing in the doorway of my room. His tone was casual, bored. "Make sure these go to the archive," he told someone off camera. "She's useful for observation studies." That word, useful, stung more than anything. I paused the video. My face on the screen looked like a ghost watching her own undoing. I turned to the orderly. "How long have they done this?" "Months," he said. "Maybe a year. They record patients for compliance reviews, but you weren't supposed to find out." "They filmed without consent." He nodded, guilt heavy in his eyes. "I'm sorry. I thought you'd never know." For a long moment, neither of us moved. The only sound was the faint buzz of the fluorescent bulb overhead. It flickered, the light stuttering like a heartbeat losing rhythm. I thought of the scent of roses from the day I first arrived, now replaced by the cold glow of exposure. My protector, Claire, entered quietly, her coat pulled tight around her shoulders. "You shouldn't have this," she said, glancing at the screen. "Then why did he bring it?" I asked. "To protect you. But if the board finds out, both of you will be gone by morning." I looked at her, at the worry she tried to hide. "If silence protects them, I'll take the noise." Claire sighed, stepping closer. "At least make a copy. If it disappears, we're finished." We transferred the files to a second drive, the small LED blinking like a pulse. I could feel my heartbeat matching its rhythm. Somewhere between fear and fury, a vow took shape. I would not be rewritten again. "I'll send this to an external contact," Claire said, slipping the new drive into her pocket. "Someone who can verify chain of custody. It'll take 48 hours. 48 hours, I repeated, grounding the number like a promise. "After that, they can't erase me." The orderly whispered, "Be careful. They'll notice the gap in the archive." I met his eyes. "Then let them. Let them know I'm watching now." That night, I couldn't bring myself to turn off the light. Every shadow looked like a lens waiting to open. I took the mirror from the wall and faced it toward the corner, as if forcing it to watch itself. But even then, the room didn't feel empty. The silence carried a faint hum, the ghost of recorded laughter, the echo of my own stolen voice. I pressed my hand to the cold glass and whispered, "You can't keep me inside you anymore." In the glow of the bedside lamp, I saw movement, a ripple of my own reflection, half real, half residue. It felt like confession, like the truth had finally caught up. The mirror had recorded everything. Truth costs more than the lie ever did. I learned that the morning the envelope came back from the notary, edges pressed sharp, the paper heavy with official weight. I'd held too many falsified documents in my hands to mistake the texture of something real. This one was mine. My signature, my seal. No ghost of someone else's pen shadowing over it. I'd written every word of the complaint myself. No lawyer, no advocate, just me and the gatekeeper who typed what I dictated, his eyes flicking between my notes and the trembling folders I laid out, like evidence from a war. Each page had been dated, cross-checked, stapled twice. 4 months of transaction lines, 4 identical withdrawals, $4,200, $4,200, $4,200, $4,200, total $16,800. My stolen care turned into neat arithmetic. The gatekeeper exhaled. "You're sure you want this sent? Once it leaves the office, there's no turning back." "That's the point," I said. "I want it to go where they can't erase it." He hesitated, then pressed the seal into the bottom corner. The wax hardened slowly under the fluorescent light, its surface gleaming like a wound cooling over. The first copies went to the nursing board. The second, to the bank, my proof attached, ledger entries marked by date and reference ID. The third went to the press, folded in a brown envelope marked confidential. I used the same post route they'd once used to intercept my letters, only this time I walked it myself. Outside, the wind bit through my coat. I remember the sound of traffic, the rush of voices that didn't belong to the institution. It felt almost foreign, life that hadn't been filtered through policies or schedules. I dropped the envelopes one by one into the metal slot and whispered, "Your turn to watch me." That night, I slept for the first time without fear of being filmed. The mirror was still covered, the light on, the sense of surveillance fading to a faint hum in the back of my mind. I dreamed of folders burning, orderly, peaceful, like cleansing fire. By morning, the silence began. No nurse came with my tray, no check-ins, no small talk, only the sound of the radiator and a faint knock that never followed with footsteps. At noon, the director himself appeared in the doorway. He didn't sit. "You've made a mistake," he said. "I corrected one," I replied. "You've accused a licensed facility of fraud." "I've proved it." He smiled. Thin, polite, predatory. "Do you know what they call this kind of stunt?" "Accountability," I said. His eyes darkened. "They call it blackmail." The words hung heavy between us. I felt the air change, thick, electric. "You stole from me," I said quietly. "You took what was meant for care and turned it into profit." "We provided a service," he countered. "You're here, aren't you? You've eaten, you've slept, you've written your fantasies in peace." "Peace?" My voice cracked. "You filmed me, you rewrote me, you built peace out of my silence." He stepped closer, lowering his tone. "Withdraw the complaint. We can make this disappear." I laughed softly. "Disappear? That's your specialty, but not this time." He leaned in, whispering, "You're playing with people who own their outcomes." I met his stare. "Then I'll make mine cost them more." After he left, I sat at the desk again. The wax seal had cooled fully now, solid against the paper. I ran my thumb over it until it caught the edge of my skin. Proof didn't just live in documents. It lived in the courage to send them. By dusk, the gatekeeper returned, his coat dusted with rain. He handed me a small note. "Received and logged," it read. Beneath it, a date and case number from the board. Official, permanent. For a long time, I just looked at it. It wasn't victory yet, but it was record. The first sound of truth pressing back against the walls that tried to contain it. Outside my window, the last light faded from the street, soft and unassuming. Somewhere, phones would ring, questions would start, hands would tremble over ledgers that no longer lined up. And I knew, for once, I had written something they couldn't rewrite. They called it blackmail. One morning, room 12 was empty. The sheets were still warm, the pillow dented, the air faint with her perfume. I stood at the doorway, staring at the half-folded uniform on the bed, a pale blue reminder that silence had claimed another voice. The hallway was unusually quiet. Even the hum of the overhead lights seemed lower, as if the building itself had learned to whisper. I reached for the window latch. The glass was cold enough to sting. Outside, frost clung to the ledge, though it hadn't snowed in days. It felt like the room had exhaled her last breath and sealed it behind the pane. By noon, the staff bulletin listed her name under transfer, pending documentation. The police arrived an hour later, polite but detached. Routine verification, they called it. Their pens scratched lazily across the report, each question designed to lead nowhere. She was my assigned social worker, I said. She was preparing a complaint. One of them looked up. Do you have proof of that? I have her notes, I said, and a copy of the report she filed. Filed or drafted? I hesitated. Drafted, but she signed it. He smiled slightly. Then it's not official. They closed their pads and left as quickly as they came. When I asked for the case number, the younger officer shrugged. You'll see it in the records, he said. I never did. That evening, the temperature dropped. The radiator hissed weakly, the air growing sharper by the minute. I sat beside her empty bed, tracing the outline of the uniform folded at its edge. The fabric felt stiff, frozen. A faint chill lingered, like the ghost of a warning. She knew this would happen, I whispered to no one. The words sounded strange, swallowed by the quiet. In the corridor, the nurse on duty avoided my eyes. You shouldn't be here, she said softly. Where is she? She was transferred. Transferred where? Her lips pressed into a thin line. That's confidential. I followed her glance toward the notice board. The staff list had been reprinted, her name gone entirely. Even her locker was empty, the tag removed, keyhole sealed with a round patch of metal, erased as if she'd never existed. Later, I went to the storage wing, the one they said was off limits during inspection hours. The door creaked open under my hand. Inside, boxes lined the walls, each labeled with patient IDs and clearance stamps. I found one marked with her handwriting, familiar loops curling over a brown folder. I reached for it, but the lid was already half open and empty. Behind me, a voice spoke quietly. You shouldn't touch that. It was the orderly, the same one who had once brought me the flash drive. His eyes darted toward the security camera in the corner. They took everything, I said. They always do. You can't fight shadows. She filed something, I insisted. Her report was next. He shook his head. Not anymore. We stood in silence for a moment. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paper. Somewhere down the hall, a door slammed, followed by the echo of hurried footsteps. What happens to them? I asked. The ones who speak? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and handed me a single ribbon, white, frayed, torn from a badge. She dropped this in the hall last night, he said. Keep it close. It might remind you what you're risking. I held it in my palm. The texture was rough, the edge slightly burned. She must have pulled it hard before they came. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window watching the faint trail of frost creep across the glass. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed, then faded into nothing. When dawn came, a memo slid under my door. All residents are reminded that unauthorized contact with staff is prohibited. Below it, no signature, just a black seal. I folded the ribbon into my notebook and wrote one sentence beneath it. They erased the messenger, not the message. As I closed the book, the radiator clicked once, releasing a final breath of heat before silence returned. The building had learned its rhythm again, obedient, unbroken. And I finally understood. They could make anyone disappear. They said it wasn't a trial. Then why the audience? Rows of strangers stared as I took my seat at the long table, the microphones already live. The air buzzed faintly, every whisper magnified. A dozen reporters filled the aisles, pens poised, their cameras blinking like restless eyes. The board members sat elevated, their faces unreadable under the white fluorescent lights. It smelled faintly of disinfectant and nerves. The arbiter motioned for quiet. "This hearing will address allegations of misconduct," she said. Her tone carried the weight of ritual more than justice. I could feel the paper in my hands, 6 pages, double-spaced, trembling with the pulse of my own heartbeat. On the table before me lay a folder marked Exhibit Reference 23B. Inside it, a USB drive waited, the same one that had once flickered inside a dark room, showing me my own reflection trapped in silence. The director sat across from me, flanked by counsel. His posture was calm, controlled. When he adjusted his tie, the gesture was casual, but I saw the tremor in his fingers. The arbiter nodded toward the technician. "Play the clip." The first sound was my voice, soft, uncertain, followed by laughter. The screen behind them came alive, grainy footage from my room. I watched myself sitting on the bed, reading, unaware. The same mirror, the same angle. A murmur rippled through the room. Someone gasped. Another whispered, "She was recorded?" I gripped the edge of the table. The sound of my own voice filled the hall. "Lily, I know you'll visit soon," I'd said. Then came the mocking response, nurses laughing, mimicking, rewinding the tape. The arbiter turned sharply. "Who authorized these recordings?" No one answered. The director looked straight ahead, expression carved from stone. "We follow standard evaluation procedures," he said finally. "Monitoring ensures patient safety." "This wasn't safety," I said quietly. "It was surveillance." A camera zoomed in. The red light blinked. The entire country could be watching. I wasn't supposed to care, but I did. For the first time, the truth wasn't confined to a folder. It was sound, sight, evidence. The arbiter leaned forward. "You allege tampering with institutional funds and patient rights. Do you have documentation?" I slid the folder across the table. Transaction summaries, signed ledgers, and verification entries. 4 identical withdrawals, $400 each month. All under Tazi's, the same department head. The room shifted. Reporters scribbled, papers rustled. The arbiter scanned the figures, eyes narrowing. "And this signature?" "Mine," I said. "Falsified." The director finally spoke. "She's mistaken. These are internal reallocations. Confidential." I looked straight at him. "Then why hide them under my name?" For a heartbeat, the microphones captured nothing but the sound of breathing, the kind that fills every courtroom when truth hits oxygen for the first time. The arbiter gestured again. "Proceed with Exhibit 23B. The footage resumed, showing the staff laughing as they altered timestamps, pausing over a chart that bore my initials. The arbiter raised a hand, stopping the playback. "Enough!" Reporters erupted with questions. "How long has this been happening? Were others filmed? Is she the only victim?" The director's composure cracked. "This is misrepresentation," he snapped. "Context matters." The arbiter's voice was quiet but final. "Then context will be reviewed under suspension." She tapped the paper before her. "Effective immediately." For a moment, no one moved. Then the cameras turned toward me, lights glaring hot against my skin. The arbiter looked my way, not kindly, not cruelly, but as though seeing me for the first time. "This hearing is adjourned," she said. "The board will reconvene after verification." The crowd erupted, not with chaos, but applause. Startled, I looked around. Faces I didn't know were nodding. Some even stood. The sound rolled through the room like a wave breaking over years of silence. I didn't smile. I couldn't. But in that noise, I felt something loosen, like a window opening after too many seasons sealed shut. The director gathered his papers, his jaw tight. Cameras followed him as he left, flashes chasing him down the corridor. The arbiter leaned toward me. "You did the right thing," she murmured. "For her," I said. "The one who vanished." She nodded, signing the last page. "Her report made it through. You just delivered it." I looked at the microphones, still glowing, still live. For once, they were amplifying truth instead of rumor. When I finally rose to leave, the applause swelled again, softer this time, and the applause sounded like mercy. He smiled as if forgiveness were his to give. The courtroom lights were too bright, reflecting off every polished surface, the gavel, the glass partition, even the thin strip of his tie that caught the light each time he moved. He looked like a man rehearsing control, the kind who'd convinced himself truth could be negotiated if delivered with charm. His lawyer began softly. "My client has endured months of defamation, humiliation, and personal attack. We ask the court to recognize the damage caused by these allegations, none of which have been proven credible." The judge nodded once but said nothing. Paper shuffled. Cameras clicked faintly at the back. I could hear my pulse louder than any sound in the room. Then his lawyer turned to me, eyes polished, voice syruped with civility. "You made very serious claims against a respected institution. Are you a medical professional?" "No," I said. "So these accusations, recordings, financial inconsistencies, how did you obtain them?" "I lived them." He smiled again, same smile as always, controlled, dismissive. "You claim to have evidence of surveillance within your private quarters?" "Yes." "And yet, these so-called recordings have not been independently authenticated." I leaned forward. "Because your client ordered their destruction." A whisper rippled through the room. The judge raised a hand. "Silence, please." The director's lawyer pressed on, smoother now. "Isn't it true that you were previously under evaluation for mental distress, that perhaps your recollection—" "Enough!" the judge cut in. His tone didn't rise. It dropped, heavy and deliberate. "You will confine your questions to material facts." The director's smile didn't falter, but his jaw tensed. "Your Honor, context matters. My staff acted under clinical supervision. We followed standard compliance measures." The judge turned his gaze toward him. "Who installed the cameras?" The question hung in the air. No one moved. Even the reporter's pen froze mid-sentence. The director's mouth opened, then closed. "We outsource certain security measures," he said. "You'll have to refer to internal contractors." The judge leaned back slightly. "Then you admit there were cameras?" A pause, long enough for the truth to breathe. He cleared his throat. "For monitoring safety." "Inside private quarters?" The light caught the glass wall beside him, scattering across his face in fractured lines. For the first time, he looked exposed. Not powerful, not composed, just human and cornered. My ally, the gatekeeper, leaned in beside me, whispering under his breath. "He's unraveling." "Good," I murmured. "Let him see what silence sounds like when it's his." The judge continued. "The court has received 3 documents," he said, lifting the file. "Each bears institutional letterhead and 2 matching signatures. All 3 contradict your previous testimony." The director's lawyer tried to interject, but the judge raised a hand again. "No spin, no narrative, just facts." The clerk displayed a court document on the screen, reference ID 47C, dated 2 years earlier. It outlined an internal directive: behavioral monitoring, long-term ward. The second line read, "Install optical units discreetly." The director's face drained of color. His fingers twitched against the glass of water beside him, the reflection quivering with every breath. "I'd like to remind this chamber," the judge said, "that negligence is not cured by policy." He turned to me. "We will proceed to a full inquiry." For a moment, the room felt suspended between heartbeat and verdict. The gatekeeper exhaled slowly, as if releasing months of breath held in silence. I didn't move, didn't smile. The director adjusted his tie, fingers fumbling. The knot slipped. The gesture was small, but the meaning was enormous. When the hearing adjourned, reporters swarmed the corridor, microphones thrust forward, flashes erupting like a storm. I said nothing. The light followed me down the steps, sharp, white, relentless. But this time, it wasn't watching me. It was watching him. From behind, I heard his voice, low, strained, desperate. "You'll ruin everything." I turned slightly. "No," I said quietly. "You already did." For a heartbeat, he tried to summon that same polite smile, the one he'd worn through every lie, every meeting, every polished defense. but his smile finally trembled. Justice arrived on printed paper. It was pinned to the main door of St. Haven before dawn, the ink still fresh, the paper trembling in the cold morning air. The corridor smelled faintly of antiseptic and dust, as if the building itself had been holding its breath. I stood there, among nurses clutching their coats, reading the words none of us ever thought we'd see. St. Haven license revoked, effective immediately. No ceremony, no explanation, just a seal pressed deep enough to leave an imprint through the page. Someone whispered, "It's over." Another answered, "No, it's begun." I reached out, my fingers grazing the embossed edge of the notice. The texture felt heavier than any apology, rough where the seal had broken the surface. For a moment, I could almost feel the weight of every name buried beneath the institution's silence. A reporter's camera clicked behind me. "Can you give a statement?" I shook my head. "Not today." The light from the hallway flickered, catching the metallic frame of the door. Beyond it, the offices were empty, drawers pulled open, papers half-strewn, abandoned in haste. I saw a single mug left behind on the counter, still bearing the faint ring of coffee. Details, small but human. Proof that even those who enforced cruelty thought they'd return. The protector's name appeared at the bottom of the document, her signature stamped beside mine, but hers was marked with an asterisk. Filed posthumously. My chest tightened. She hadn't vanished after all. They could erase her body, not her voice. "She made it count," I whispered. The lawyer from the hearing, my gatekeeper, approached, holding a copy of the legal order. "It's official," he said. "Revocation under Clause 7, full institutional shutdown, property freeze for review." "How long will it stay?" "Closed?" "Until they rebuild it right," he replied. Then more quietly, "If they ever do." We walked through the entrance together. The locks had already been changed, thick new bolts gleaming under the light. The same doors that once sealed me inside were now symbols of containment reversed. Each turn of the key echoed like restitution. In the courtyard, a small crowd gathered, families, former patients, staff. Someone began clapping. It wasn't loud, but it spread, one hand after another, until the sound filled the space like a heartbeat returning to rhythm. I felt tears, not from grief this time, but from recognition. A nurse I barely knew came forward. "You did this," she said. I shook my head. "No, we did." The wind caught the corner of the notice, fluttering it against the door. The sound, a soft, repetitive rustle, reminded me of the letters that never left the postroom, every secret that tried to escape, but couldn't. Now the truth was pinned where everyone could see it. The gatekeeper handed me a folder, thinner than the one I'd carried for months. "Your copy," he said. Inside were just 2 pages. The legal confirmation and the final audit line, 4 identical figures again, $4,200, $4,200, $4,200, $4,200. Beside them, a single annotation, recovered in full. I traced the ink until it blurred beneath my fingertips. "It's strange," I said softly, "how justice looks like paper." He smiled. "And yet, it weighs more than stone." I lingered until the crowd thinned, until the cameras stopped flashing, until the sound of the lock turning became the only thing left. Then I pressed my hand flat against the cold surface of the door. "Do you hear that?" I murmured to the empty hall behind it. "That's silence." It wasn't forced or fearful now. It wasn't the hush they'd used to bury truth. It was mine, chosen, earned, deliberate. Silence, at last, was mine to choose. Lily looked at me as if meeting a stranger. The air between us was still, heavy with everything we hadn't said. The lamp on the table glowed softly, its light trembling across her face like memory trying to remember itself. She stood by the doorway for too long, her hand gripping the strap of her bag as if letting go would make the moment too real. "I almost didn't come," she said. Her voice carried that blend of courage and guilt I used to hear when she was a child, caught lying about small things, except this lie had lasted years. I nodded. "Then why did you?" She swallowed hard. "Because I saw it. The video." The sound of her words was louder than the quiet room could hold. I looked down at the table where a printed home visit report lay open. Entry ID 12F, stamped in blue ink. Proof that the truth had lived somewhere, even when she refused to believe it. "They told me you were unstable," she continued, "that you made stories up to protect yourself. And you believed them." Her lips parted, then closed again. "I wanted to believe you, but they sent letters, so many letters, each saying you'd signed a settlement, that you'd agreed to silence." I exhaled slowly. The scent of dust rose from the old fabric of the sofa, age, memory, time stitched together. "Silence was never my agreement," I said quietly. The lamp flickered once, and in its glow she seemed younger, fragile. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I thought you'd lost yourself. I thought I had to move on." I reached out, hesitating before my hand met hers. "You did what they trained you to do. Trust authority." She looked up. "You hate me for it?" "No," I said, and it surprised me how true it felt. I hated the space between us. Her eyes shimmered, reflecting the light like glass catching morning. I didn't know what to believe anymore. "Believe what you saw," I said. "Not what they wrote." On the television screen, paused at the edge of the frame, was the same footage from the hearing, the stolen recording that had once been used to shame me. I pressed play. Together, we watched my younger self sitting on the bed, unaware, her voice soft and unguarded. Lily's hand went to her mouth. They filmed this?" "Yes." "And everyone saw?" "Everyone who needed to." She covered her face. "How could I have defended them?" "Because you were taught to. Because love makes us blind to what power can do." The light deepened, shadows stretching long across the floor. A picture frame on the shelf caught it, a photo of us at the beach, before any of this began. I noticed how her hair then was bright gold under the sun, her laughter frozen mid-breath. "I used to think this picture was cursed," she said softly. "Now I think it's proof that we were real once." I smiled faintly. "We still are, just altered." The clock ticked faintly, each second a reminder that the past didn't stop when truth arrived. It lingered, learning how to breathe again. She leaned closer, her voice breaking. "I read the reports, the home visit entries, the financial trails. Everything you said, it was true. I saw the references with my own eyes. They even listed the folder code you mentioned, entry 47C. Proof always outlives denial," I said. "It just waits for the right witness." Her shoulders shook. "I thought I was one of them, but I wasn't brave enough to ask questions." "You are now," I said. "That's all that matters." The lamp's glow softened, no longer glaring, just warm, like forgiveness had texture. She looked at me then, really looked, as though searching for the mother she once abandoned in rumor, and in that fragile silence, something shifted between us, not erased, not mended, but bridged. "I don't know how to fix what I did," she said. "You already started." For a while we just sat there. The room was small, the light steady. The sound of the city outside faded to nothing but the hum of the old lamp. Lily brushed her tears, her voice small again. "Can I ask something?" "Of course." She hesitated, eyes glimmering. "Can I stay the night?" She asked to stay the night. Even the wind knows names that paper forgets. The garden stands where the old reception once was, where forms were stamped and voices erased. Now, sunlight spills through young branches, and the scent of jasmine drifts where disinfectant used to linger. Each tree carries a plaque, bronze, engraved, quiet. The arbiter stands before them, reading each name with the care of someone watering roots. The sound is steady, measured between pauses, like prayer without doctrine. I kneel beside the smallest tree. Its bark is soft, still finding texture, its leaves trembling against the light breeze. "You'd have liked this," I whisper. My protector's name gleams faintly on the plaque below. The metal is cool to the touch, edges sharp but honest. A faint murmur passes through the crowd. Nurses, former patients, neighbors. Not one of them rushes to speak. Grief has made us fluent in silence. The arbiter lowers the list, folds it once, and says, "We cannot unmake what happened here, but we can name it and refuse to let it fade." The air stirs gently. I catch the scent of jasmine again, stronger now, mingling with damp soil. For a moment, I think I hear her laugh, the same low, patient sound she made when the nights felt too long. A child runs between the benches, her shoes scattering petals as she goes. Her mother starts to scold her, but stops, smiling instead. "Let her play," I say softly. "That's what this place is for." I sit on one of the benches, paint still fresh, the wood still holding the scent of polish. The bench bears an inscription carved into its side. "For those who spoke, even when it cost them everything." "Do you come here often?" the arbiter asks, sitting beside me. "Every week," I say, "sometimes to talk, sometimes just to listen." "To the wind?" he asks gently. "To what's left of courage." He nods. "You've done more than you think." I shake my head. "I only survived." "That's where justice begins," he says, "with the ones who endure long enough to tell it." We watch as volunteers water the garden, 12 trees now, each marking a voice once silenced. A plaque beside the gate lists every name, aligned in neat order, each one engraved with a reference number. Entry B9, entry D4, entry H2. Proof etched into permanence. I trace the outline of one letter. "It's strange," I murmur. "All that harm, turned into roots." He glances at me. "It's how memory grows." The laughter of the child drifts back across the space, soft and unafraid. The wind catches the petals again, carrying their scent higher, beyond the walls that once confined us. "I used to think justice meant punishment," I say. "Now I think it means peace that can breathe." He smiles faintly. "And this place breathes." A bird lands on the branch above my protector's plaque, chirping once before taking flight. It leaves a small feather behind, caught on the edge of the inscription. I don't move it. Some symbols write themselves. The arbiter stands. "We'll add 3 more next month," he says quietly. "There are still people coming forward." "Then we'll plant more trees," I reply. "As many as it takes." He nods, eyes glistening. "You know, she would have wanted that." "I know," I whisper. "She's here." The afternoon light shifts, warm, forgiving. The air feels clean for the first time in years. Around me, the garden hums with its own quiet life, as if every root remembers something we were meant to forget. The arbiter walks away, leaving me beneath the trees. I close my eyes, letting the scent of jasmine linger on the edge of breath. The garden listens better than men ever did. The mirror still stands, but now it reflects peace. Morning light spills through the open window, softer than I remember, catching the edges of the glass until the surface seems to breathe. Months have passed since the hearing, since the notice on the door, since the garden began to bloom. The world feels quieter now, but not silent, just alive in a different rhythm. The journalist adjusts the camera, its lens glinting under the sunlight. "We're filming a short follow-up," she says. "People want to know how it feels. After everything." I nod. "After everything," I echo. The words feel like both question and answer. Behind her, the witness arranges a few papers on the table. A copy of the feature story, the same one that turned whispers into evidence. The headline sits in bold black letters. "Saint Haven Truth. One woman's fight for accountability." I touch the corner of the page, still sharp, still clean. The mirror stands against the far wall, the same one they'd used once to record me without consent. Now it reflects the window, the garden, the trees beyond. No hidden angles, no distortion, only what is real. The journalist gestures. Would you mind sitting where you usually have tea? Of course. I pour from the kettle, the small teacup warm in my hands. Steam curls upward, rising into the air like a breath I don't have to hide. The witness smiles faintly. You never replaced that mirror? I shake my head. No, it's staying. Why? Because I won't erase the evidence of survival. Outside, the garden sways gently. The plaques catch bits of sunlight, flickering between gold and shadow. The arbiter visits sometimes, just to sit quietly among the benches. Lily comes on weekends. We don't speak much about the past anymore. We tend to the present instead. The journalist lifts her camera again. Say something for those still waiting for justice, she says softly. Something honest. I take a breath. The light hits the mirror again, framing both my reflection and the view behind me. The garden, the plaques, the sky just breaking open with dawn. They smiled, I begin, as if I were already gone. But I'm still here. The air stills, as though the world is listening. I can hear birds outside, the distant hum of the city, the faint clink of the teacup as I set it down. When you fight for truth, I continue, it's not victory you chase. It's peace. It's knowing you can stand in front of what once broke you and not flinch. The journalist lowers her camera slightly. That's beautiful, she says. It's ordinary, I reply. That's what makes it powerful. The mirror catches her image now too. Two women framed in the same glass, one recording, one remembering. No hierarchy, no shame, just reflection. I glance toward the window. You see that? She follows my gaze. The light. Yes. It used to hide everything, I whisper. Now it shows what stayed. The witness folds the last document into an envelope marked Archive Record 19A. He nods to me before leaving it on the shelf. For once, proof doesn't feel like a weapon. It feels like closure. The journalist packs her gear, lingering by the door. Will you keep talking about it? She asks. Not every day, I say, but when silence starts sounding too familiar, I'll remind the world what it cost. The light deepens, stretching across the floor until it touches the base of the mirror. I watch it climb slowly, filling every corner of the glass until my reflection dissolves into brightness. For the first time, I don't step away. I let the light find me, unguarded, unafraid. The mirror doesn't accuse anymore. It listens. The camera clicks one last time. A still frame, the mirror, the garden, the dawn beyond. And in that moment, everything aligns. The proof, the peace, the promise kept. The light no longer hides.